What's up, everybody? It's DisThunder from the Foosh, and today we're going to look at the Mezco 112 Collective Predator figure from the original movie from 1987. I initially had big plans for this review and I want to do them outside, but unfortunately I live in Utah and it's now December and it decided to December all over my plans. So rather than trying to take pictures of a predator in a foot of snow, which makes absolutely no sense, I'm going to come back inside and we're going to focus on the nuts and bolts instead. Size comparisons, articulation, accessories, and so on. Let's start then with the obvious size comparisons, and that would be with a NECA Predator on the right and the Bandai SH Monster Arts figure here on the left. Not surprisingly, the Monster Arts one is probably the closest to the Mezco Predator in size and overall scale. As you can see here, their knee joints are almost the same height. It's really just a little bit taller in the chest, upper torso area, I think, is where the biggest change is. When we talk hard numbers, the Monster Arts figure is about 7 inches tall at the top of his helmet, whereas the Mezco one is 7.5. So then, of course, when we come back around to the NECA Predator, you can see right off the bat, his hips sit about a 1/4 inch higher than the Mezco Predator, and everything just kind of continues to elongate from there. He's got a lot longer torso. Interestingly, though, if you look at like the difference between where the knee joints are and the elbow joints and such, it's not maybe as dramatic as I expected it to be. I think the NECA Predator actually comes off a bit lankier than I'd expected. And at 8 1/4 inches tall, that makes sense. I'm almost a little embarrassed to show this guy now, but this is my Alien vs. Predator Capcom custom that I made on a Mutant Leader body several years ago. And yeah, there's not much in common here at all. Mine is so much more cartoony and puffy looking compared to the realistic proportions of the new 112 Predator, but I still had to bring it out and show you. Before moving on with the scale comparisons, I want to address my one major grievance with the figure, which is the same as everybody else's, which is the single jointed elbow and no bicep swivel setup. Getting the Bandai figure out, again, I had forgotten his double jointed elbows, but as you can see here, it's not really the joint that's the issue, it's the range. He's just a little bit under 90, whereas the double joint just only gains him a little over that 90-degree bend. But the Bandai figure has a regular bicep cut, which lets you turn it in and you get more inward motion with it, whereas the Predator one has the hinge swivel. Speaking of Monster Arts, here is the Warrior Alien figure from the same line. And this is more personal preference than actual scale thing, but I actually like the aliens looking smaller and spindlier like this in comparison to a Predator than, say, the NECA ones that are huge and just as tall and almost just as thick. I still really like these figures, and they were built like tanks. And of course, here's my custom Dutch and Hawkins. Dutch is built on a mix of Commander Rogers and Logan, and Hawkins, I don't remember. Might be Daredevil or something like that. And that's why when I said earlier I was kind of bummed about this review, I had big plans, man. I was going to take these guys out down by the river and get them in the mud and do some cool pictures, but I can't do that under a bunch of snow. And here he is with the 112 Collective Supreme Knight Batman and G.I. Joe Classified Series Dusty. As you can see, that's a lot better scale than anything you could do with one of the NECA figures. And just for fun, here's the Lantern Toys Jungle Hunter Predator, who is nearly the same size and scale. I believe he comes to 6 7/8 inches tall. And if you have younger collectors in your house, this is an excellent substitute for letting them play with your Mezcos. He even has a removable helmet. They're just great figures overall. Actually, while I've got his biomask, let's address a little controversy. The Jungle Hunter biomask usually has the shiny black lenses, not the mesh covers for the eye holes. In the movie, it was shown this way with the black lenses. But in subsequent video game appearances, like AVP Evolution, it has the mesh look. So while this isn't movie accurate, it is still consistent with some of the Jungle Hunter appearances. Let's go ahead and go over the articulation in some more detail, because I think it's better than I had been told, but maybe still not as much as I had hoped for. He has a double jointed ball neck, a ball at the top, and one at the collar that allows for a lot of range of motion. The soft reds help with that as well. The left arm is fighting with the plasma caster and the armor, so you're not going to get it much more of a T-pose than about there. The soft wire helps with that a little bit, though. Between the hinged elbow and the mesh, you're going to get just about there, so just under 90, and a bit of swivel, but as you can see, the mesh starts to catch as I move it. The right arm fares a little bit better with that pad being able to move up and out of the way. You can get him almost to a T-pose, and again, just short of 90 degrees on that bend and swivel. I was initially afraid they omitted the torso joint. It's not fantastic, though. I mean, range forward is pretty minimal. I wonder if you can rehab it a little bit. Back isn't bad, and you do get a swivel as well. Hips are pretty good, and here the mesh and the netting doesn't get in the way as much. Out is great. There is a swivel at the top. You can get forward a decent amount, and there's decent double knee bend as well with a joint hidden by the knee pad. His ankles, they're good for stabilizing and not a whole lot else. There's not a lot of range there. The plasma caster is also articulated. It has a couple of hinges and it should swivel, but it's very delicate and very tight. Kind of good intentions, but maybe not the best execution. And with that, let's go ahead and get into some of the accessories and features on the figure. His left side wrist gauntlet has a hinged panel to open up for the computer readout. And you can see some nice paint detailing in there. And you know what? It's sturdy. The hinge opens and closes nicely. I've had NECA ones that fell off in the package before. And despite the somewhat limited articulation, you can finagle him into a pose where he is touching that computer panel with a little bit of effort. The plasma caster on his back is removable and pretty packed with detail. It also has a light up feature, which is very cleverly hidden. You'll want to remove this back panel here to insert the batteries. And there's also an additional hidden panel where the on-off switch is, but I don't use the on-off switch. You see those two little leads on the front of the box there? Once you put it in there securely, that should kick in the light up feature, but you've got to get it just right. Mild panic setting in. And actually, there we go. When it's in person, it's even more impressive, but it looks pretty good on camera. It's a strong little LED, and those little wires that run on the back are what powers it, hence the kind of restricted movement. To turn it off, I just pulled the battery pack out slightly like so. He has a firing effect that plugs in there, but I lost it. So we'll just move on to the biomask and pull it by the magnet underneath, and you can see there is another light up feature, much easier to get to. Once you flip that switch and then replace the biomask, you will see there is his targeting laser. And again, that's actually a really cool effect with a very imposing little laser. Even under my studio lights, it still comes through pretty well. And as I mentioned, he has soft dreadlocks, which is a nice touch. Here is the unmasked head, and as you can see, this is where this figure's strong suit really is the paint and the sculpt areas. You see his eyes kind of recessed back in there with some nice paintwork on them, the quills on like his eyebrows and his forehead. Just the paintwork overall is really nicely done. This head also has a feature of its own. Pull on his mandibles here, you will see there's a peg and a magnet underneath, and you can swap that out for an open yelling face. It does take a little bit of fitting. It's actually a surprisingly good fit, but once you get it locked into place there we go. And again, there's some really nice paintwork there, especially like the wet effects on the inside of his mouth. For what it's worth, in general, I think paint is one of the high points of this figure. The skin textures, the armor, all of that works extremely well. Everything feels very realistic and very battle-worn. His right gauntlet has its own take on the wrist blade problem that we've dealt with since the NECA days. They are interchangeable. You have a short set here that go in with that bottom rail sliding into the bottom of the gauntlet, and you also have these longer ones. If I can get the focus back to where it needs to be, there you are. And I actually like this solution. It feels sturdier than like the old adjustable ones like we had on the original NECA figures. These seem pretty sturdy. Here is his meta kit that can also plug into his plasma caster backpack when you're not using the battery. You see there's a couple of tools done in there in paint and in relief. And like I said, that just ports in where the battery goes otherwise. One of the complaints that I heard about this figure early on that I actually think is kind of unwarranted is he has a low accessory count. I don't think that's necessarily true. He has a very condensed accessory count with a lot of features plugged into them, like the wrist blades and the LEDs and the exchangeable pieces and stuff. And it's worth pointing out, the 87 Predator didn't use a lot of weapons in the movie. He didn't use the combi stick or the throwing stars or any of that stuff. He was his plasma caster and his blades. But he does come with a severed head and spinal cord. And really, what more do you need than that? Among his extra hands, he has one that holds for close grip like this that works well on the spine, and then he has a little wider grip that goes on his right hand that kind of holds the skull. I'm going to plug that in here real quick, though, just to finish the look. You notice there are also 2 bandoliers and a necklace that has some additional trophies on them. I consider those more costuming pieces than I do accessories, but hey, they're part of the parts count. There we go. Little Predator triumphant pose. So while this review was not exactly what I had in mind and not quite as exciting as I'd hoped for, I think the figure actually ended up being better than I had expected. The early looks and previews we got of the figure kind of lowered my expectations, but having it in hand kind of brought them back up. I don't love the hinge and swivel elbows, although I do see the aesthetic value in doing them that way. It fits his silhouette better. Maybe if we get like an AVB Predator or something down the road, he can get a bicep swivel kind of like Conan's, bulk him up a little bit. That would just give him just that little bit more range. I don't know if that's something that Mezco's looking at doing as far as doing more Predators go, but I hope they do because I feel like this is still a good start. And let's not forget it took NECA 20 years to perfect theirs. So with all that said, I'd still recommend this guy. I feel like his articulation shortcomings are surpassed by the sculpt and the paintwork and the overall presentation. So thank you to Mezco Toys for helping me get a copy to review. Thank you for sitting through this kind of more procedural review. And I promise when the weather gets good, we'll get some more pictures outside and have some fun. See you soon.